What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to MorFab Industries, and welcome back to part something or other of that car. I'm not sure what part this is because we've been going through it so many times. I've showed you guys so many different videos on it, but today's goal is going to be to fit the exhaust manifold. We got a Megan racing header for this car. Now, we've got one of two options here. I've already taken the liberty of fitting the header in the car to see where we're going to have clearance issues, and I'll take you guys along to see that in a minute, and then we'll go over what we're planning on doing with it. But first, I wanted to take a little bit of time out. I read the comments on everything, and I've seen a lot of negative comments about the swap in this car, and not that it's really a big deal because obviously everybody has their own opinion, and I have an opinion as well. I personally wouldn't have swapped this car, but the owner of the car did the swap years and years ago when it wasn't as popular as it is now. So back when this swap was done, it was pretty groundbreaking. You know, it was probably one of the first K-Series motors in a 5th gen Prelude to ever exist. And throughout the process of that, things were tweaked and things were, you know, possibly improved and everything else, but not by the best people. Or I should say not by the most talented people or people who are not in the fabrication industry. So there was a lot of weirdness with this car, and there was a lot of crap that went on with this car that wasn't quite right. And truth be told, no matter how good of a fabricator you are, this engine does not fit in this car. The oil pan hangs low, the valve cover sits high, the motor sits a little funky in the car, the transmission sits a little too far forward. There's just not enough room there. So you kind of have to go the good with the bad. So putting this engine in this car, you do have some caveats, like when you turn the steering wheel full lock, the rubber boot of your axle shaft will hit the little horseshoe that comes down over the lower control arm for the strut. So you have that issue. And then obviously you can't slam the thing to the ground because you'll be banging the oil pan off of everything. And then, you know, there's no parts available. There's no swap headers available. There's none of that available for this car. So it all has to be custom made. So definitely very expensive, very time consuming. And in my opinion, only my opinion, it's not worth the money to do something like this to this particular car when you can literally take the H22 that's in this car and put a turbo kit on it for half the cost that it's costing to put this K-Series in there the right way. And be at plenty of horsepower and have it be plenty of fun. But I get where the owner was coming from with this car. I understand why he did it. I still think it was a cool idea. I personally wouldn't have done it, but hey, you know what? Everybody's got their own thing. There's a K-Series in this Datsun right here that I wouldn't have put, you know, a K-Series in myself, to be honest with you. But that's the new rage. You know, the K-Series is the new Chevy small block, so I guess it goes in everything. But all right, so let me take you guys along. I'll show you what I found with this header. I'm going to give you guys a couple of different options of what we're actually going to be doing to try to get this header to fit, and we'll go from there. All right, so the header is up in the car, and you can see right off the bat that it sits pretty far off from where the factory exhaust should be. And the factory exhaust should be right about there, and we're a good, you know, 1.5 to 2 inches off with the header. Now the header is fit on the motor properly-ish right now, but we do have clearance issues at this cross member right here. We have a clearance issue right there. We have another clearance issue up in there. And then I don't know how far up there you guys will be able to see, but you can see that the header is not yet touching the engine. So it's not bolted all the way up yet. And then it looks as though there's going to be a clearance issue with the axle shaft there, but however, there's not going to be, because if you can imagine right now, this header, if you can see, is actually sitting on a downward angle. And once we get it bolted to the motor, it's actually going to bring that up, and which will in turn bring it away from the axle shaft over here. So once we get it away from that axle shaft over here, get everything straightened out, will be good. Now my only concern is right here is the steering rack. So with that being the steering rack right there, I'm afraid that when we get this, we have a good 1.5 inches up in here that this can raise up. But my fear is that we raise up and we hit the steering rack, and then at that point, what we're going to have to do is pull this header out and completely remake this header. We're literally going to have to flatten these 2-in-1s, rotate them, flatten them out a little bit, flatten this one out a little bit more, lengthen up all these pipes, bring this whole section down a little bit so that we can get it to come out. But hopefully we can get away with just modifying the subframe and cutting some of the spaces out and possibly remaking one of the little braces that's in there and getting the clearance that we need, because once we get past the subframe we have plenty of clearance. So let's hope we can do that. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to take this header back out of here. We're going to clearance this subframe where we need to clearance it, and then we'll see if it fits. Alright guys, so my tripod isn't the greatest in the world, so I couldn't necessarily get the angles I was looking for, and if I can find the flashlight, I'll show you guys what we ended up doing. How do I lose this flashlight all the time? You guys see it? You guys see it anywhere? I don't know what I did with it. I really don't know where I put the flashlight. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, flashlight found. It was in a spot where it shouldn't have been. I don't know why. But tripod's broken, so I really can't get you guys like action shots, but clearance right there. I know that's a little excessive, but we have a bracket that we need to put back in there, and I may need to modify that. It's just an extension bracket, or like a support bracket that runs right along there. So hopefully we can fit that in there. But what's nice now is that that guy fits like it's supposed to. Now we're still, because it's a Civic setup, we are still off a little bit with the exhaust, but we can make that work. We can make a nice little S-bend and make that work no problem. We've got plenty of clearance, which might not look like much, but that is not touching the rack. We still have about 3/8 to 7/16 of an inch between the rack and the actual pipe, which we can throw some heat wrap around the rack just so that that doesn't get too hot. We also have clearance at the axle, and we are pretty much flush up against the cylinder head. So I'm going to take it up top and we're going to throw some bolts in it, and then we'll come back down, make sure our clearances don't change any with the gasket on, because that's super important. Like I've said to you guys before in several of my fabrication videos, you'd be surprised at how much room gaskets can take up. So when you're doing something that is as tight as this is right now with fitment, you want to make sure that you put the gaskets in even on a dry fit, because your gaskets can add, you know, let's just say the gasket is 1/8 of an inch thick or 1/16 of an inch thick. Add 3 or 4 of those gaskets in there and you could potentially be off by 3/8 of an inch, 7/16 of an inch. In some worst cases where you've got the big fat donut gaskets, you could be off 1/2 an inch to an inch. And you need to make sure that you're compensating for gasket width and length and everything else when you're putting these systems together. So let's get all that stuff bolted in, and I'll bring you guys back. We'll see if there's any fitment issues afterwards. Alrighty, well there we go. Everything is in. All our clearances are good. We shot a little bit of self-etching primer. Look at that, the shadow pointer. Pointing with my middle finger right now. Yeah. Anyway, shot a little bit of self-etching primer on there. We probably could have gotten away with cutting a little bit less up in this area right here. Kind of went a little crazy with that, but it's not going to make a big deal because we put this bracket back in. And guys, when you're doing a project like this, try to get rid of as little as possible material-wise. Now, that bracket, we could have said, you know what? We don't need that bracket anymore. We're not going to use it anymore. But the problem with that is that you really need these structural mounts in these cars. They're put there for a reason, so you kind of need to put them back. So what we did was we actually kind of modified it to a point where everything fits. We have no clearance issues. Everything up in there fits. We've got clearance with the axle, which is awesome. We've got pretty much the clearance everywhere that we need. So we're good. So now the only thing we have left to do is we have to make this work. Now, everything looks great from that angle, but from this angle you can clearly see that we are going to need to make something that takes up that jog right there. So my thought is, if I can find some 2.5 inch pipe around here, you take a 90, cut it in half, rotate it 180 degrees, weld it back together, and you will get exactly the 1 width of pipe over you need. And then we can cut it back here. We can cut it right there and weld that whole assembly in and make everything made up. So let me search the garage, see what I find, and when I find something, I'll bring you guys along. So here's what we ended up with. Now, we needed to get basically a full pipe width. So the pipes are sitting, you know, like this right now. I don't know how well you can see that, but they're sitting off sides from one another. What we need is a piece that goes in and around like so to meet up with that other piece that's here. So what we came up with is basically these two. Now I'm going to show you how I measured what I needed. So basically we need a full pipe width of separation. So now if we take a straight edge and we measure from the inside of this pipe to the outside of this pipe, we see that we literally, well, you might not be able to see it, but see if I can get that in there for you. With these set up, when you put a straight edge across those, like so, the inside of that one is meeting the outside of this one. So that is that exact width of pipe that we need, which is going to be perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these two together real quick. Then we'll go back over to the car. I'll show you how this is going to work. We're going to use some stuff off the existing exhaust system, and we're going to weld it to the rest of the existing exhaust system so that we have all the flanges and everything else that we need. But this will take up that space perfectly, instead of the way it was before where the exhaust was slammed all the way over to the passenger side and, you know, wasn't good for anything at that point. So let me fire up the welder. We'll get these two welded together. Helps if I turn the breaker on. Alright guys, just for poop and laughter, welder settings on this particular one are DC, obviously. We're using the number 12 Furic cup. We got our gas at about 25, 26 CFH. Tungsten is ground to the point where you can't focus on it. Let's see. Yeah, ground to a pretty decent point. You can't see it really. But we're going to tack these together, then we'll weld them fully. We're not going to back purge or anything. Probably should back purge it, but it's just an exhaust. There's nothing downstream of it but a big old fart can, so not really going to matter if any of the shit breaks off and goes flying down the exhaust system. And yeah, this is sort of a budget thing, so we're just going to tack these together real quick. We'll be welding at 65 amps. We'll go full pedal on the tacks, and we'll probably do about 35, 40 amps on the rest of the weld. So here we go. And it's nice too, because you could just fusion tack this stuff. So you don't need filler rod when you're tacking, as long as your fit up is good. I like to put a little bit of a weight in there, just so that this isn't moving around while I'm trying to weld it. And I'd zoom in a little bit further for you guys, but I'm afraid that it's going to really hurt the sensor on this camera. One of these days I'll get a rig so that you guys can actually see the arcs. But money permitting, of course, the usual. So let's just burn this together quick. Alright guys, so not too bad on that one. Let's see if we can get a good focus on that. Our fit up got a little bit janky on the back, so you can kind of see the bead widened up a little bit. These two pieces of pipe didn't fit 100% perfect together, so that's why we got a little bit wider of a bead there. So nothing to write home about, but not terrible either. We did get full penetration, even though it's a little bit sugary because we didn't back purge it, but that won't hurt anything. So now I'm going to take you guys over to the car and see how this is going to fit up on there. Alright, so now we're at the car. What we're going to do basically is we got this chunk of pipe right here that is part of the original header setup. It's kind of like a little piece that they give you to bolt to it. Then you have the regular exhaust right here. So what we're going to do basically is I'm going to cut this piece off and we're going to weld it onto this piece so that we have something to bolt to the header. So then this piece will go in its place right here. So as you can see, that guy perfectly takes up to exactly where it needs to be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark this, cut all this stuff apart, and get everything welded up there, and then I'll bring you back and I'll show you what it looks like. Lady and gentlemen of the jury, and I say lady because there's 0.1% of you, there is the completed, with O2 sensor, exhaust. And back there, I just threw a quick MIG weld on that. I didn't want to go crazy with it. So basically, what you're looking at, if we look at it from this angle, it looks a lot better. There we go. You could see the jog that needed to happen to get it to actually fit in that pipe. Now, I wanted to center this resonator, but the problem that I was running into is this is an aftermarket exhaust. And if you look back here, this pipe here is pretty much in the perfect position that I need it in. Now, if I center the resonator, this corner of the pipe right here hits right there. So we had to kind of offset it in the tunnel a little bit, but at least everything else fits completely and without any sort of interference. There's nothing touching. We got to get a little rubber hanger for over in this general vicinity, but for the most part, it is good to go. So that is it for that one. We got that checked off the list now. I know I say it all the time, but I always start every clip with, all right, guys. But, all right, guys. No, so we basically got the exhaust done on this thing. That's what we wanted to accomplish today. We got the header slightly modified. I didn't film any of that because literally all we did was just make a quick cut, pinch together, and a re-weld just to kind of make things fit a little bit. Then we had to make that pipe, which I took you along for. Got the pipe in there, got everything fitting. We clearanced the subframe, made all that work. So now this has a full exhaust that doesn't hit anything. Doesn't hit the K-member, doesn't hit the body, doesn't hit the bumper, doesn't hit the end. I mean, it's clearanced perfectly. So another chapter on the Prelude done. Exhaust is 100%. We're good there. Only things we really have left is now we just have to reassemble everything we took apart. We got to put the radiator back in it. We got to do all the wiring again, which there's some stuff in the wiring I want to clean up too. Some of the plumbing I want to clean up a little bit. And just a few, minor details that are going to ensure that this thing is going to be reliable once he gets it on the road. Because being that this engine doesn't really fit in this car, we have to take the utmost care in making sure that everything that we do is perfect. And trying to get everything set up in a manner where the car is going to be reliable. He can maybe drop it a little bit further than it is currently now. My honest opinion is to just leave it at just about stock ride height, maybe lowered an inch or so, and they look great that way. But not my car, not my problem per se. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm hoping the next video we'll be able to get this thing started and get it driving. We should be able to. I only have probably 5 or 6 hours left to work on the thing. We do have to fabricate that patch for the wheel well, so that's going to be coming too. I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to weld it from the inside or the outside, so we'll film that. We got to shoot a little coat of paint on a few odds and ends, and then we'll be good to go. Wire it all back up, and off it goes. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. Stick around. Probably within the next week, I'll have the last and final video on this car. We'll get it running. We'll get it back to the owner. And we'll get it out of my shop. so that I have a little bit of room. I know this one's taken a while, guys, and if Justin, the owner, is watching this, I apologize for it taking so long, but we wanted to make sure that it was perfect for you. So when you pick it up, shouldn't have any issues with it, and everything will be good. So, all right, guys, I will see you on the next one. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks for subscribing. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. We're almost at 10,000. We are literally like 68 away from 10,000 right now. So maybe by the end of this video, we'll be at 10,000, which will be amazing. That was one of my goals. So thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate all of you who watch, all of you who comment, and we'll see you on the next one.